Hello everyone, and welcome to today's session, Cyber Threat Intelligence and Incident Response, Best Practices to Secure Your Cloud. I am Preetama and I will be your host for the day. Our speaker for today's session is Malini Rao, Global Head of Cybersecurity and GRC Operations. Please note that the session will be on listen-only mode and will last for about 40 to 50 minutes, out of which the last 10 minutes will be dedicated to Q&A. I would request all the participants to post all your questions in our Q&A window. Also, we have two criteria for the certification. Firstly, our participants need to attend the full session. Secondly, they have to fill out a survey form and give the correct answers to all the three questions, which will be based on this particular session today. And the form will be sent to you by Monday. A little bit about our speaker before we start today's session. Malini Rao has 2 decades of experience and expertise of working globally in various areas of cybersecurity, such as cyber defense, cyber forensics, application security, and many more. She has managed large multi-million-dollar projects and large teams globally. She has rich experience working in various industry verticals like financial services, healthcare, information technology services, retail, consumer good, oil and gas, and many more. She has taken up leading roles in corporate houses such as cybersecurity architect, program manager, CISO, head of cybersecurity, and GRC operations. Malini is also a global women in cybersecurity influencer and a board member of the Women in Cybersecurity community at ISA. She has received many recognitions and awards for her contributions as a cybersecurity influencer and a mentor. And without further delay, I give the floor to Malini to start with the session.
Thanks, Preetama, for the great introduction. Hi, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are listening. So I'm sure you might be waiting for this session for a long time because it was postponed from the last time because of my engagements that I was quite busy. So today's topic is cyber threat intelligence and incident response best practices that we're going to look for securing the cloud. I'm not able. Okay, all right, sorry for that. Okay, so today's agenda is we are going to talk about a cloud security shared responsibility model. I'm not going into details about the cloud computing, what is cloud computing, the basics, because I'm sure the team here already is aware about what is cloud computing. So I will go through the cloud security shared responsibility model. We'll discuss about threat intelligence, incident response, what are the platforms available for threat intelligence solutions. We should understand what is threat intelligence lifecycle before we talk about the best practices. Then we'll talk about incident response process, and then we'll talk about the role of threat intelligence analyst and incident responder. What exactly does threat intelligence analyst and incident responder do in a day-to-day of his day-to-day work that he carries out on a day-to-day basis. We look at the some of the recent cloud cyber attacks and what kind of statistics are there from the CISO's perspective. What are the top concerns from cloud cyber attacks perspective? And we'll also look at some of the cloud threat intelligence and incident response solutions available in AWS, Azure, and GCP cloud. We will also talk about the best practices to follow to secure your cloud from incident response perspective, right? I mean, how can you make sure in a cloud environment you are ready for facing some of the cloud related incidents, and how do you respond to it, and how you will make sure that you are protected in your cloud environment. So we will talk about that. And of course, we'll take some of the questions in the end of the session. Okay, now I'm sure some of you might already be aware about the cloud security shared responsibility model. This was released initially by Amazon, but now all the cloud service providers have created this for their environment, and share this. So the key point here that I want to say is cloud security is not just about the cloud service provider. It's not just about AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud that they are responsible for it. It's equally the consumer, like the user, is also responsible for the security of the cloud. So when we call it as security of the cloud, it is cloud service provider responsibility. And when you call about security in the cloud, it is the cloud consumer's responsibility to ensure the security in the cloud. So if you see here where the red color one is the customer's responsibility in the cloud. So for example, the customer data, right? The data itself within the environment of cloud that we are hosting the data on the cloud, customer is responsible for that. Now, across the platform applications, identity access management, whether it is operating system, network, or firewall configuration, it's all the responsibility of the customer. But when it comes to the cloud service provider, they are responsible for the infrastructure. For example, AWS global infrastructure, they are responsible for ensuring the availability zones are available all the time, the regions are available. The compute, storage, database, and networking aspects for those regions and availability zones, they are responsible for that. They are responsible for the edge locations. So the gray part here, this is the responsibility of the cloud service provider, and the red color here, what we see, mainly the customer data and whatever data that you host on your cloud environment. Also the security, some of the security configurations that you do, like security groups, as well as some of the rules that you set up for the identity and access management within the cloud environment, that is the customer's responsibility or the user's responsibility. For example, here client side data encryption and data integrity authentication mechanism, right? That is the responsibility of the customer. Server side encryption, file system, and or data, that is the responsibility of the customer. Network traffic protection, encryption, integrity, and identity. So those aspects is something which customer has to take care. So whenever you have your contract with your cloud service provider, you have to make sure that the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, and the security responsibilities are also clearly defined, that who will take care of which part of the infrastructure, software, as well as platform part. Okay, so now let's look at what is cyber threat intelligence and incident response. So when we talk about cyber threat intelligence, it is more about gathering the information from external as well as internal within the organization. So if you talk about Gartner, they have defined it as threat intelligence is evidence-based knowledge, including context, mechanism, indicators, implications, and action-oriented advice about an existing or emerging hazard to the assets. This intelligence can be used to inform decisions regarding the subject's response to that menace or hazard. So according to me, threat intelligence is the actionable data, right? So when you collect data from various areas within your organization, as well as you get the data from outside the organization, you need to make sure that that is actionable. You can come up to make sure that you are able to respond to a particular security incident, or you identify if there is any malicious activity going on within your organization. So threat intelligence helps identify compromised data, malicious activity, or indicators of compromise relating to the cyber incidents. So I would say cyber threat intelligence and incident response are complementary to each other, because while you are responding to an incident, you need to make use of cyber threat intelligence. So incident response is, of course, a methodology an organization uses to respond or manage a cyber attack, right? So whenever there is a cyber attack, if you don't have an incident response plan or a process in place, you will be in the last minute in a very bad shape, and it will be all over the dark web, and people will be aware about the data breach, on how bad you manage the data breach once the cyber attack happens. So if you have a proper incident response in place, and you have tested the incident response process before any cyber attacks hits you, definitely you will be in a better position than any other competitor or any other organizations who are not prepared. And definitely you will be able to protect your assets in a better way, even though there is a cyber attack. So for example, I mean, any organization may have a breach. They may be having a cyber attack, right? I mean, any organization, it is possible. So it's not that if you are a large organization or a small organization, you will not be subject to cyber attack. Even large organizations are subject to cyber attacks. So I would say in having an incident response process in place, having an incident response plan in place, you are protecting yourself and you are protecting your company time, resources, and brand value. And more important is whenever if we see there is a damage that happens due to cyber attack, the damage will be comparatively less, and you'll be able to recover very quickly compared to if you don't have an incident response process. And the investigation process will be much faster if you have tested it in past. So what are the top cyber threat intelligence platforms? So when we are talking about cyber threat intelligence, we gather the data, we collect the data from external as well as internal feeds, like I mentioned. So when it comes to manage the entire cyber threat intelligence, we have multiple solutions available. Of course, we have free solutions as well as, open source, as well as we have the licensed versions of the solutions. So some of them are like IBM or Anomaly or Recorded Future. These are some of the top threat intelligence solutions and platforms being used. There is Alienware, there is Cypharma. I have just listed down some of the top cyber threat intelligence platforms. There are many nowadays in the market who have cyber threat intelligence platforms who provide the feeds from various sources. So it is very important that you look at what kind of sources they are getting the data from and whether they are latest and they are of any value to your organization. That's more important. Now let's look at what is cyber threat intelligence life cycle. So when it comes to cyber threat intelligence, there are various phases in the process of gathering the data and then analyzing and disseminating it. So let's look at quickly on the 5 phases that are there in cyber threat intelligence. So it starts with planning and directions. First, you set scope and objectives for your core intelligence that you need and what are the processes that will be followed. So you will set those scope and objectives first, and you plan in what direction I want to have this, what kind of data that I should collect. So the next phase is the collection itself. Then you deploy the data gathering and processing techniques. So you can have the threat intelligence platform to collect the data and then feed into your SIEM solutions, or you can have a SOAR kind of a platform where the threat intelligence can be integrated with those solutions, and you can have this intelligence fed into it, and you can have the alert mechanisms set for analyzing it. So while you are doing analysis, you should have to translate the raw intelligence into meaningful and taxonomized actors, events, and attributes. So analysis is more important because you need to have the actionable data and then you analyze it so that you identify the threat actors and you identify any malicious attacks that are that might be possible or that might have already happened within the organization. So production is assessing the intel significance and severity based on the business and environment context, and then dissemination of feedback. You have the report generated and then consider it based on urgency. If there is any urgent possibility of attack, then you make it as urgent and confidential based on the final report that you come up with based on the analysis. Now let's look at the cyber incident response process. So whenever there is an incident, you basically there are 2 aspects of cyber incident response. There is proactive capabilities and responsive capabilities. So when it comes to proactive, it is more of preparation, detection, and analysis. And when it comes to responsive, it is containment, eradication, and recovery. So whenever there is a cyber attack, you quickly prepare, detect, and analyze proactively to find out if there is a cyber attack within your organization, if there is any ATP kind of an attack. For example, we saw SolarWinds attack, which was more of a advanced but APT, sorry, advanced persistent threat, and the threat actors were already had exploited the network monitoring solution from SolarWinds. So those kind of attacks can be identified if you have the right threat intelligence feeds and you have the right incident response process and you have the right solutions to complement the threat intelligence and incident response process. So to have a successful incident response plan, you need to go through the 6 steps, which is best practices 6-step framework. You have to prepare, define an organization level security policy, what qualifies as a security incident, and step-by-step guide on how to handle an incident. So you have to prepare it in that manner to make sure that you are following the step-by-step process. You have to then identify what criteria, specific kind of security issue or a cumulative set of circumstances trigger the incident response plan. Then you stop the threat. Once you identify and that what is the threat, then you stop the threat from spreading across the organization and doing further damage by implementing short-term and long-term containment process. So you might contain your laptops, you might contain the network, you might look at your VLAN and you can make sure that the VLAN is contained, or if there is an endpoint, you have to contain the laptops, and you have to contain those hosts to not infect your entire network or your entire environment within your organization. Then you establish a process to restore all the compromised systems and update the defense system to prevent the same security incident from occurring again. So you come up with the process to restore and recover your data and compromised systems, and make sure you do that. And then recovery is determining a strategy to bring all systems back into full production. So make sure that everybody is fully productive without any downtime. Then, of course, the learnings, you have your RCAs and learnings. You review the documentation of an incident and update it, your IR plan based on feedback for the whole process. Now, quickly, let's look at what is the role of a cyber threat intelligence analyst, because I'm sure there are some students and lateral people who want to move from IT to cyber security field, and they want to get into cyber threat intelligence. They might want to look at what the cyber threat intelligence analyst does. Of course, as you move into the ladder, you move from analyst to the higher cyber incident responder, and then you move to the higher levels of the roles within the organization. You can become the CSERT manager, and then of course leadership levels. But this is the starting point. As a cyber threat intelligence analyst, you will be responsible to independently collect, analyze, and production of finished threat intelligence in support of cyber defense technology. The analyst is responsible for collecting information and conducting technical analysis to develop intelligence for the enterprise. Additionally, you have to maintain the awareness of the global threat landscape and review the complex technical threat data. So you need to have that research kind of mindset to keep an eye on what is the global threat landscape. You need to subscribe to a lot of threat intelligence feeds. You need to make sure that the key stakeholders are informed in a right manner after you perform the technical analysis. You will also need to regularly collaborate with the cyber defense teams, threat detection team, active defense, digital forensics team, and incident response teams, right? So that you are working as a team, and then in some of the organization there is a red team and blue team as well. So threat intelligence would come under blue team, and you have to work closely with red team while you are defending your organization threats. So I would say as a threat intelligence analyst, you should know about the different types of threat intelligence. What kind of threat intelligence is strategic, operational threat intelligence, what kind of threat intelligence. Then you should have in-depth knowledge of numerous methodologies, tools, and platforms. So the platforms just now I discussed, it's good to have experience in those platforms. If not, then you can look at some of the uh, open source platform available. You should know about the frameworks like OSINT and MITRE ATT&CK framework, where you have to know about tactics, techniques, and technologies. So MITRE ATT&CK framework is about some of the techniques that already the attacker is using, right? Some of the attackers, like the APT attack that happened on SolarWinds case, it was one of the Russian hackers. So um, those particular hackers, what kind of techniques they are using? I mean, most of the time they use similar techniques, similar or more or less similar techniques. So those are already defined in MITRE ATT&CK, and then you have to identify those threat actors, and then you have to make sure that you have your organization protected from those kind of techniques, tactics, and technologies that the attacker is using. And of course, you should also know how to gather the data from indicators of compromise. So indicator of compromise is how this attacker is going to compromise your system. The whole cyber kill chain process, if you're not aware, you can Google it. The whole cyber kill chain process you should be aware of, how the attacker attacks the environment. and what kind of indicators are generated and how it gets compromised. So those are something which you should be aware of as a cyber threat intelligence analyst. You should also know about the numerous data collection and acquisition techniques, like I mentioned, the OSINT tools, DNS interrogation, and some of those. Because why you need to know is because there are multiple ways of collecting the data, like search engines, website footprinting, web services, using OSINT tools. Because the attacker is going to use these kind of solutions as well, the automated solutions. So we have to, as a defenders, also have to make sure that we are having the right sources to collect the data and then analyze it. We should also know variety of data analysis approaches, like the analysis of computing hypothesis. Threat modeling is very important, fine-tuning the threat analysis, creating runbooks and knowledge bases. And you should also know about some of the statistical data analysis. Nowadays, you should also know about the machine learning techniques for data analysis as well. And now coming to knowledge and application of threat intelligence solutions. Of course, you should have creativity, analytical skills, research kind of mindset, which I have mentioned. And of course, if you have hands-on experience, like you have created a lab in your environment, you have it on your laptop or desktop in your house, have that, and you have set up at home lab, that is also useful if you are a newbie to the entire field. There are of course experienced professionals who have set up the lab at home and then they practice, keep practicing different types of attacks in their environment, not on some other organizations, within their environment. With the disclaimer, I'm mentioning that. So to just make sure that we are white hat professionals and all. Now, role of cyber incident responder, right? We talked about cyber threat intelligence, and now we are looking at cyber incident responder. So incident responder is like a police officer because he's always in a firefighting mode, right? So you are trying to protect and prevent major threats and attacks from happening. If needed, you have to apply those changes and so that they don't occur again. So you are more like a police officer or firefighter. You have to recognize any errors or possible vulnerabilities in your network or system. You have to develop a system of procedure on how you are going to handle emergency, like, right? For example, if there is a incident which is very high critical incident, right? So you need to have procedures in place so that you don't run around when that incident happens. You just don't run around. Where is the run book? What is the process I'm going to follow? How I'm going to escalate this. So you should always have a run book in place. You should have the procedures in place so that you follow those step-by-step procedures and comply, of course, with the regulatory requirements while you do that as well. You effectively oversee systems and applications for any suspicious activity. You collaborate with other security team members to get the information. That's very important. In some of the organizations, incident responders also run the penetration testing, risk analysis, and security audits. You have to develop a system for communication trail that needs to take place during an emergency and how to relay the necessary information to the legal team or the law enforcement. That also procedures need to be defined and needs to be followed. And of course, provide well composed reports to proper management team members so they are alerted in a timely manner, and detailed RCA with the reports on what happened and how the incident was responded and contained. Those aspects needs to be recorded as well. Then the role of the skills required are for a cyber incident responder. You should be familiar with forensic software like NCase, Helix. These are some of the examples. It's not that you should have all the solutions. Maybe some of the solutions are there and some of the solutions. So NCase, Helix, XRY, FTK, these are some of the forensic software solutions, top of forensic software solutions. You should have knowledge of OSINT. You should be comfortable with archiving and backing up a variety of technologies. You should be fluent in major programming languages like Java, PHP, C++, of course, Python also in today's world, Python, JavaScript. Highly proficient because in cloud environment, most of things are on JavaScript or it's Python scripts, or it could be any other programming language which is used for the cloud. So highly proficient in computer operating system like Linux, Unix, and Windows. Basic understanding of internet-based application security. You should be quick thinking and confident in making decisions in high pressure situations, because Incident responders, like I said, are firefighters and police officers, so they need to work in high pressure environment. They are willing to adapt to emergency situations. They are great in problem solving, logical and rational thinker, and they are of course good in good. They should have good communication skills. So make sure that your communication skills is good. Now let's look at, so what I did was I covered the basics of cyber threat intelligence and incident response. Now let's look at how it is applied in terms of the cloud environment, right? Because most of the organizations during COVID-19 have moved to cloud or are moving to the cloud environment. So we should understand what is happening in the cloud and how we should safeguard ourselves. So recent, some of the cloud cyber attacks and major cloud threats in 2021. I would say the recent ones, of course, it was in 2019 to 2020. Some of them are in 2021 as well. Capital One Bank, which is a famous cyber attack which happened due to one of the AWS employee having access to the Capital One Bank environment, used that platform to hack the Capital One. Because of some of the misconfigurations, was able to get that access. Dropbox also similarly misconfiguration. Uber is also misconfiguration. S3 buckets were misconfigured. More or less, I would say the cloud breach happens due to the data breach happens in the cloud environment is due to the misconfigurations, or it is due to some of the cyber hygiene, the password sharing kind of thing, or the privileged access is exposed, right? I mean, you don't manage the privileged access in the right manner. So that's the reason the cyber attack happens in the cloud. So there is a recent survey that was done in 2020-2021 by a survey company called Admatic, where nearly 80% of the businesses have experienced at least one cloud data breach. And the 300 CISOs that were surveyed, they said security misconfiguration is the highest threat in the cloud environment. Lack of adequate visibility into the access settings and activities is also on the top. Identity and access management and permission errors is one of the another major cloud threat. Additionally, there were findings, top priorities for cloud security for compliance monitoring, authorization management, and security configuration management groups. Top priorities for cloud access are maintaining confidentiality of sensitive data, compliance, and providing the right level of access. And some of the top cloud security concerns are data loss. Some of the top concerns, there is no right incident response process in place, data confidentiality, accidental exposure of credentials, and of course regulatory compliance. And data sovereignty is something of top concern to the CISOs. Now, what are the solutions available in AWS, Azure, and GCP Cloud when it comes to threat intelligence and incident response? So AWS has a very good documentation on AWS threat intelligence and incident response. The links I have put it here. Now, when it comes to threat intelligence, AWS has something called as VPC flow logs, virtual private cloud flow logs, then DNS logs, which you can have them sent to CloudTrail and to the S3 buckets. From CloudTrail, it goes to the S3 buckets. And there is something called as Amazon Cloud Guard Duty, which is a threat intelligence and detection solution. Amazon Guard Duty is managed threat detection service that continuously monitors for malicious and unauthorized behavior to help you protect an AWS accounts and workloads. It monitors many log types that Amazon Guard Duty analyzes, like the VPC flow logs, CloudTrail, and DNS logs. So Guard Duty will have all this logs sent in, and it will actually give the analyze those logs and then give you the some of the threats that might already existing within your environment. And there are solutions like Amazon Macy for S3 buckets. It is mainly for S3 bucket, and Amazon Inspector provides detection capabilities. Amazon Detective assists with investigation, including tracking and gathering the information. So all this is available. I have seen most of the organization, they are not even aware these are available. And some of the organization, of course, they use it full-fledged. And there are, of course, third-party solutions also that you can integrate with. If you are not using third party, you can very well use some of the out of the box solutions available, but you need to customize it based on your environment. Then coming to Azure, of course, you have security logs, application logs that can be sent to Azure Sentinel. Azure Sentinel is a SIEM solution that is available from Azure, and you can integrate all your logs to Azure Sentinel and have the intelligence and incident response within that. And then there is Azure Security Center where you have all your compliances and alerts set up. Then Azure Threat Defender is one of the solution available within the Security Center now. You have Azure dashboards and workbooks where you can have all these reports nicely configured and have mix and match of different workbooks and dashboards there. Application insights give you the insights about the application level logs and application level what is happening at the application layer. And then Azure Monitor is for the overall infrastructure monitoring of Azure. So these are some of the documents available for Microsoft Azure environment. So you can go to these links. There is also one of the document from Cloud Security Alliance for incident response in Azure, which is here. Now coming to the Google Cloud logs, right? So Google Cloud environment, right? In Google Cloud, you can have the Google Cloud logs which are sent to Google Cloud Security Command Center. So Google has a very good solution for Google Cloud Security Command Center where you can have complete overview of your security, which is also can be used as an incident response solution. And you have Google Chronicle, which is an SIEM solution similar to Azure Sentinel. And you have VPC service controls, which is specifically for virtual private clouds that you can set up. And of course, there are documents available. So I would say just subscribe to AWS security best practices, subscribe to Azure's and Google's if you're using all the three, of course, and then you will keep getting updates on whatever new things happening. And of course, if these are some of the really good solutions available as a cloud native solutions which you can use it. So right now I'm talking about best practices to secure your cloud more from the incident response perspective. Of course, there are best practices you need to follow like the multi-factor authentication, identity access management, have your cloud group set up properly, have your uh, data at rest and data in transit, have your AWS keys or Azure keys. Don't share them and keep rotating the keys. All those best practices, it's already there in the AWS Azure Google environment. You can go to AWS and find out the best practices. There is security architecture framework also, which all those are available. But what I'm talking about here is how do you prepare for cloud related incident? Because this session we are talking more on the threat intelligence and incident. So I would say you need to prepare for a possible cloud-related incident. You need to make sure that you include in your cloud security strategy proactive simulation. You should do a tabletop exercise or use cyber range kind of a solution where you allow your organization to practice playbook completely from end to end and identify gaps in your environment. So that is very important in cloud. Have the right tools during incident response. Sometimes the tools don't work, so test it properly and make sure that it works effectively in a cloud environment, such as endpoints or at the network level. Having tools specifically designed for investigation and action within the cloud environment helps enable organizations to defend the cloud-based assets. So that's very important. So some of the organization will just reimage their instances, which is not good. I would say you should redeploy. When an incident is detected, the first instinct is often to simply reimage the cloud-hosted machine or an instance. But doing so loses valuable forensic artifacts because for as part of cloud security investigations and as part of the incident response process, you need to have your forensic artifacts. So instead of redeploying, instead of reimaging, better to redeploy so that the incident responders can perform thorough forensic investigations to helpfully stop on that activities. Then search out for policy dead spots. Cloud security, of course, as I said, it's shared responsibility, and understanding which party is responsible for which component helps to prevent any gaps. So it should be clearly defined. And of course, as I said, you should use the right threat intelligence solutions and right threat intelligence feeds by understanding how threat actors are trying to break into cloud environments and what they do once they're inside. Organization can better detect and defend against malicious attacks. You should also perform threat modeling within your organization, as I mentioned earlier. Uh, there are many threat modeling frameworks available. Microsoft has its own threat modeling framework, which you can check out those as well. It's available on. Yeah, so that's about it. I'm happy to take up the questions if there are any. Thank you very much for all your time, and I hope it was useful. Preetama?
Thank you so much, Malini. Thank you so much, Malini. That was a very informative and insightful session. And I can say that our audiences have loved it because there are a plethora of questions waiting for you in the questions tab. But before we take the Q&A session, everyone, I would like to say that today's webinar is in sync with two of EC Council certifications. One is our CTIA program, which is the certified threat intelligence analyst, and this particular certification maps to many roles in the industry, like threat intelligence and intelligence analyst, threat analysis and reporting, vulnerability management, and threat intelligence. Whoever has this certification is eligible for 11,000 plus job vacancies globally, with an average salary of 90,000 $90,107 per annum. Other than this, the other certification that this particular webinar syncs with is our ECIH program, that is the EC Council Certified Incident Handling Program. Anyone who has this certification is eligible for more than 10,000 plus job vacancies globally, with an average salary of $76,252 per annum. So if any of you are interested to know more about these certifications, please take part in the poll that will be on your screen right now, and let us know your favorable mode of training. So Malini, can we start with the Q&A? Hello?
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
I think
okay.
you
So
are saying
Malini,
all enabled, right?
yeah, the poll will be on, but we can take the question and answer while the poll is going on.
Sure. All right.
Okay, so I'll start with the Q&A, Malini. So the first question is, how can we manage APTs, previously unknown threats, with the help of CTI?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I would say APTs, as I mentioned, right, the MITRE attack framework. So if you are using some of the solutions like SIEM and detection and response XDR solution, you need to integrate that with the MITRE attack framework. You should perform threat hunting and gather the intelligence, which I was mentioning, the right feeds and the actionable feeds, right? And you have to slice and dice that information to make sure that it's applicable to your organization. So I mentioned about tactics, techniques, and technologies, TTPs, that you have to identify. You have to identify the indicators of compromise. You have to identify the threat actors using MITRE attack frameworks. You can use tools, frameworks like OSINT as well. So those are some of the frameworks that you can use and integrate that with your cyber defense solutions, so that you identify the APTs within your environment well in advance, if there are not in the last stage, or maybe they are there in 3 months or 1 year in your environment. For example, in case of Equifax, they were there in the environment for a very long time. They could identify it almost after a year. Even after they identified, they were not able to contain, and they were able to continue the attacks on their portal in various other locations, Canada or other all over the globe. So that's how I would say. So you need to have the right frameworks. You need to use right techniques, tactics, and technologies. You need to have. You need to identify. You need to perform threat hunting and also have the threat intelligence deployed and integrated with your security solutions like SI. I hope that answers the question.
It sure does. Thank you
Pratima,
so
I'm
much,
not
Malini.
able to. Pratima, I'm not able to see the questions. Are you sharing those?
Malini, if you go, you will be able to see that there is questions tab in the toolbar that is there.
Okay.
Okay, so if you just click there, there is a portion that says undock pane from control panel. So if you click that, you will have the questions tab in front of you, and all the questions are there.
Yeah, I can only see one question on the KPI. I don't see any question. I don't know why. Maybe you should. I see one question. What are the best security KPI for managing shared responsibility in the cloud, especially for SaaS? I can take that probably after that. You need to take that up.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
So the best security KPI for managed shared responsibility in cloud, especially for SaaS. As I said, right, I mean, for SaaS, most of it is managed by the cloud service provider, but however, the data is the responsibility of the cloud consumer. So I would say the data protection is something which you need to look at, and complementing the data protection, your data security and data protection. You should have additionally, you should have the SLAs with the SaaS provider. You should make sure that the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, and you should have the visibility into your data. So that is something which you should have in place when it comes to SaaS, because if your data is lost, it's completely you are having no control over it. So make sure that you have the control and visibility for your data within your cloud environment, that you should make sure it's there in the contract with your SaaS service provider. Please go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you so much, Malini. Malini, the next question is, what is the best approach to tackle zero-day exploits in cloud as threat intelligence analyst and an incident responder?
So 0 day is something where the patch is not available, but I would say if you have the right incident response process in place, and if you have the patch management done on a regular basis, you should have yourself protected. But in some scenarios, the patch is not available, but there are nowadays organizations using self-healing mechanisms, self-healing solutions. For example, at the application layer, right, you have RASP kind of a solution, which is a self-protection solution for your application layer, for your application security layer. So those kind of self-healing mechanism. There is also at the infrastructure layer self-healing mechanism which can be used to make sure that for the 0 day attacks you are ready for that. But I would say when there is threat intelligence available for you in kind of a 0 day attack, it really helps, because you get the intelligence of how the other organizations are patching the solution, what kind of immediate patches are available for a 0 day attack. Those kind of information you get when you have a threat intelligence kind of solution. You have subscribed to the threat intelligence, whether it is from your existing tool provider like Symantec, or for example, or any other tool providers you have subscribed. You get the threat intelligence and the patch updates regularly. But as I said, if you have the right incident response in place, you should be able to contain when there is such kind of 0 day attacks. But as I said, there are solutions now available which can have immediate patch deployed, such as RASP solution.
Thank you, Malini. Malini, the next question is from Darshan, and he's asking what kind of impact personal data protection bill can bring on IAM utilizing CTI?
Sorry, can you repeat that question?
What kind of impact personal data protection bill can bring on IAM utilizing CTI?
Okay, I'm not very clear on what exactly Darshan is trying to ask because it's a bit confusing. But if what I understand from the question is more on the identity and access management, the personal data protection bill that is there, which I am of course assuming that it's for the India's personal data protection. He's talking about, or for matter any country, right? Personal data protection, whether it's Singapore or US for that matter. So I would say from that perspective, you need to make sure your identity and access management, it's one of the best practices. As I said, I have not discussed the cloud security best practices. For that, enough and more material is available. It's also available on my website. If you want, you can have a look at my websites there as well. But talking about identity and access management, right? So from you need to make sure that the access controls are controlled, the privileged access management is maintained. There are solutions like CyberArk or for any other matter. If you're not even using that, you should have the administrator's account managed properly. Additionally, I would say the identity and access management within the cloud environment itself, like AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, they have identity and access management. You can define the roles, responsibilities. You can have the users groups and roles defined. You have the RBAC kind of a model, role-based access model within IAM. So as a CTI, you should make sure that there is no unauthorized access given to you should make sure that the unauthorized access is not given to any of the employee within the organization. That's something which you should keep an eye on.
Thank you, Malini. Malini, the next question is by Arjun, and he's asking, machine learning attacks are evident and research on them is still novice. How do you suggest importing machine learning, as machine learning needs data which is sensitive resources and experts, and above all, bring in diverse risks?
Yeah, that is good question. I would say machine learning is the attackers have already upgraded to machine learning tactics and techniques, but of course, as a defenders, there are some organizations who are already using machine learning to a greater extent, but there are organizations who are not yet reached there. Some of the industries are quite forward in machine learning, and financial services in particular, or the technology industries are in adopting machine learning quite well. And there are people who are learning machine learning on day-to-day basis, because machine learning is not a new concept. It's just a hype created. Machine learning is used since long back. I would say in 1990s. Since then, it is being used, or even before that. But I would say this is now coming up because the kind of attacks that we are seeing is using machine learning, right? So we as defenders, we should learn machine learning. We should know about at least some basics of machine learning, how we can use multiple threat intelligence feeds, use machine learning on them, and get the right information. That's very critical. As a threat intelligence analyst, I think you should have basic understanding about machine learning and how the attacks are executed, how you can use the threat intelligence feeds and use the machine learning techniques to get the right information. So that's, I would say, you should keep up with the pace. Even though there are some organizations might not be using it, but from your personal interest perspective, I think you should keep up pace with the machine learning techniques. Some of the you can look at some of the top machine learning websites that are available for learning, and uh, look at those options available there.
Thank you, Malini. Malini, the next question is by Ian. He's asking, the threat intelligence tools provided by cloud providers have a lot of restrictions which does not provide complete visibility. Any solution that you are aware of that can bridge these gaps?
So there is no one solution fits all kind of the thing that Ian is thinking of. As a security professional, I hope and I wish that people are aware that there is no such one size fits all t-shirt kind of a tool that is available that will say that, okay, fine, this particular solution fits for this organization. So it is a mix and match, right? So when it comes to threat intelligence feeds, So it's threat intelligence is not only about fields, it's about also about monitoring and then making sure that you are using the data in the right manner. So I would say you need to have a subscription to multiple fields, but you should identify, as I was saying, right, there is a process for planning. So during the planning phase, you identify which fields are applicable. So it might be applicable for 1 year or 2 year, but the next third year it is not applicable anymore for you and not useful for you. So you need to switch gears and you need to subscribe to the new threat intelligence feeds as well. So you can't be just relying on one feed. I already gave you the threat intelligence platform list there. Those are some of the top platforms, but as I said, you need to do your own planning and testing proof of concepts with different feeds that are available on them. Identify the best.
Thank you so much, Malini. And Malini, this is the last question for the evening today. What
All
are the important factors that should be monitored as an incident handler related to Azure security alert?
Okay, so Azure is nothing different from AWS or Google Cloud. It is, I would say, the main controls that we should be looking at from the Azure, as I mentioned already earlier, right? Uh, Identity access management is one of the area that you need to look at, have the multi-factor authentication enabled. You should also look at the network layer. You should have your groups, security groups defined properly. You should have at the network layer, you should make sure that those are available. You should also have logs integrated with Azure Security Center as well as compliance checks done regularly using Security Center. You should also use Sentinel if you have the licenses and make sure the SIEM is used particularly for the Azure environment. Sentinel can be used for AWS and Google Cloud as well, and you can integrate with SIEM solutions like Splunk as well. But as I said, um, these are some of the top controls that you should make sure it is there. And of course, another big control is the encryption as well, that you should look at the AWS or Azure keys. In this case, it is Azure. So some of the key management systems should be used within Azure environment that is available, and make sure that the access keys are that's something which you don't share with anyone, and you are protecting those an encrypted environment using Vault, Azure Vault, which is available for the keys.
Thank you. Thank you again, Malini, for answering all these questions and for such a great presentation. With the questions, we have also got a lot of appreciation from our audiences who are saying that they have learned a lot from today's session. So it was a pleasure to have you with us. So
Yeah,
this
same here.
concludes our webinar. Thank you so much, Malini. So this concludes the webinar for today. Guys, those of you asking in the chat and in the questions tab, the survey form will be sent to all of you on Monday with the survey questions as well as the 3 questions based on today's presentation. And once we receive all the responses, we will be going forward and giving the certificate of attendance to those who will be answering all the 3 questions correctly. Thank you all for attending, and I am sure you all have learned and have enjoyed this presentation. Now you all can end the webinar. Thank you, and have a great weekend ahead, guys.